Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world. I am so thankful for you to be joining us today in our webinar, Know When Your Software is Malware, addressing the new era of software supply chain security. Quick that, let's go ahead and pass it over into who we are. My name is Richard Malik. I'm the Senior Director of Product Marketing over here at ReversingLabs. We've got a slew of speakers. This is actually the most number of speakers we've ever had in a webinar. I'm very excited about this opportunity. Basically, the whole product management team is represented for this webinar, and they are excited to give you all the juicy information. First off, Deval, say hello to the beautiful people. Where are you, and what do you do for us?
Hello, everyone. My name is Dhaval Shah. I'm a Senior Director of Product Management over here at ReversingLabs. I help oversee kind of more of the front end of our Spectra Assure product, and I'm based out of sunny California over here.
Excellent, excellent. Over to you, Dave.
Yeah, hey everyone, thanks for joining. Dave Ferguson, Director of Product Management over Spectra Assure. I focus more on our CLI and automation and integrations and those kind of capabilities. And I am happy to be here. I'm based out of Texas.
Bringing us home, Charlie.
Yeah, nice to meet everyone. My name is Charlie Jones. I am also a director in our product management team, specifically overlooking Spectra Assure. And my focus is really on one of the main personas that we target that we'll talk about today, which is the enterprise buyer of software and how they manage risk presented by third-party software. So excited to be here. And I'm based out of London.
Yeah, London. That's his accent is wonderful, if you can't tell from that side. So let's talk about who we are real quick. For those of you that this is your first introduction to ReversingLabs, it might be a shock. We've been around for 15 years. Now, this product that we're about to talk about, the solution that we're delivering to you, has not been around for 15 years. That's okay. It's a growing space, but for 15 years, we have been driving technology into the hands of some of the biggest names in cybersecurity. We've maintained the world's largest accessible threat repository with over 40 billion accessible threat components in that repository for the threat research. We know what malware, we know what threats, we know what risks, vulnerabilities, and everything look like. We have 300 employees distributed globally as well. You can see a couple of those dots right there, that little black dot over there in the UK. That's actually Charlie right now. It's live location. We follow him wherever he goes. The red dot over there in Europe as well is our headquarters in Croatia, where we were actually founded. The red dot on the East Coast of America, that's up in Cambridge, where our US-based headquarters, and then we're globally distributed throughout. Our data set that I mentioned, that world's largest private threat repository, it is 40 billion strong. It is 8 times larger than our closest offering. That's incredible. Now, why does that matter? It matters because in terms of that trusted intelligence that is delivered out to our customer base, over 60 cybersecurity companies trust that data to build their machine learning models, to enhance their products, get into their SIM, SOC, or SOAR. Now, this is all going to make sense in a quick second. How does this apply into software supply chain security? Well, it also has the capability to deconstruct the most number of file types, 4,800 file types, get into 400 binary types. We're looking at, that number is actually incorrect. That's 20 million files per day that we are looking at. 20 million files, my friends. That's an incredible number. And then on top of that, in terms of scale, we can go up to 100 gigabytes, in a single file package. Now, we are limited on our physical technology, not our digital technology, which is even more compelling. We haven't found the limitations of our actual software and our internal components. We're just pushing the limits of the hardware right now. So in terms of that technology, that 100 gigabytes, we're able to scan all those files, get them out there, and do that in hours. That is also in complex binary analysis that we're going to cover in a quick second. Now, when it comes to understanding why a security company is approaching software supply chain security, it's because that is a growing attack surface for this industry and for the world. Commercial software is the principal attack surface that we are seeing delivering some of the most advanced malware today. It is not net new malware that's being delivered either, as we're seeing through a lot of these examples on this slide. But these brands have all been impacted by software supply chain attacks, specifically through commercial and proprietary code. Now, some of you might be working and living and eating and breathing inside the SDLC. I've got SaaS, I've got DAS, I've got SCA. We're going to talk about that. Those have their place, but there is a major gap that exists within your software development lifecycle, and even into the third-party risk management side, which Charlie is going to talk about as well. When it comes to looking into the code that exists within those software packages, it is far more complex. And when we look at these brands that are hit, these are not small organizations. These are not small impacts. Ultimately, there needs to be the ability to address risk and negligence, focus on the breach of duty, and address the standard of due care exceeding expectations. Legacy AppSec tools, SaaS, DAS, SCA, they do their job and they do it very well. But they are purpose-built tools. They're addressing specific components. They are typically looking within the source code issues as well as for vulnerabilities. And as we are looking at the risk and the impact of the software supply chain breaches and attacks, we're recognizing that there's a lot more that needs to be addressed, needs to be scanned, needs to be analyzed. Software development teams and software purchasing teams need to have the visibility into the software packages to understand if there's malware, tampering, secrets and IP being revealed, mitigations, and really improper behaviors that are exposed. This idea of looking beyond the source code, looking beyond the vulnerabilities, it's not to say that those are not important, because they are. We're going to cover that in a little bit. What we're saying is that more information is needed to make a risk-based decision if you're going to release or deploy that software package. Now, software binary in the consumer sense, if we just quickly think about a software package, we think of it as a box. It has everything in there. It's pretty. It looks good. You assemble it, you execute it, everything works. But in reality, it is a bit more complicated. It's made up of bits and pieces of software and code that bring it all together and make it work. It's not just one long string of code. It's a bunch of elements combined together. And now complex software packages that are running enterprises today are using proprietary code, commercial code, open source code, and they have artifacts strewn within. How can a software development group or a software acquisition group properly and with confidence trust their scan if they can't look into every single one of these sections? You can't, which is why we are here addressing this new era of software supply chain security. ReversingLabs has the most powerful engine in terms of complex binary analysis. Is an A-powered engine that allows us to deconstruct the most complex and large file types. As I talked about before, it's 4,800 file types, 400 binaries, and the sizes we're seeing from our customers. We're scanning 37 gig ISOs in less than 2 hours, revealing everything within, looking at all the commercial code, all the open source code, all the proprietary code, and revealing everything in the SBOM as well as within a security focused report. On the user end, they're able to get a full report looking at the malware, the vulnerabilities, the tampering, secrets, mitigations, and licenses. That is all powered by this complex binary analysis. And going back to our foundation of the last 15 years, this is what powers everything we do here at ReversingLabs. ReversingLabs' technology is patented and driving that full knowledge of what a threat looks like. And if we can look at a threat of an individual file for threat hunting, we can look for the threats and risk and vulnerabilities inside of a software package as well. The output is just different. Now, over the last year or so, you might, if you've been interacting with us a little bit, you might have heard of us describe this as ReversingLabs software supply chain security. Let's look at that as our beta moment. We're getting out there, we're testing it, we're working with our customer base to build up the products, build up the features, build up the workflows, make sure that it is ready for prime time. And ladies and gentlemen, I am so excited to let you know it is ready for prime time. And with prime time comes a better prime name. It is now RL Spectra Assure. RL Spectra Assure is here to address the new era of software supply chain attacks with the most advanced capabilities possible. We are getting in there and deconstructing those complex software packages that are running your enterprise every single day, that you are building every single day, so that you your customers, your development team, your CISO are all knowing the risk, understanding the risk, addressing the risk in a way that keeps you ahead of the attacks, because the attacks are only going to get worse. From the software producers to the enterprise buyers, we're here to help ensure that before you ship or before you deploy, that you are informed. On the software producer side, you're identifying software supply chain issues before that release. That could be part of your CI/CD platform or a little bit more of a manual process. We'll get into that in a little bit. But as that process goes through, we're not trying to slow you down with yet another scan. That speed is critical. And if it is integrated into your CI/CD, the automation can come in for a full stop if necessary, if something does not meet the policies that you set. Maybe there's some issues, maybe something was detected that shouldn't be detected. It gets pushed back. So as part of your process, your development team is kept informed, updated, and prioritized. And on the purchasing side, you're able to scale to the amount of software that your enterprise is purchasing, updating, acquiring on a daily, monthly basis. Get in there, understand what software is going to do to your enterprise's attack surface. Is it going to change some things? Is it going to raise your risk level? Do you want to push back before you deploy this software to the mass? Where some tools are failing to address this at scale, Spectra Assure is able to get in there and scan with the full power of our AI complex binary analysis. Now, I've been talking a little bit fast because of that little glitch at the beginning, but I'm going to pass it over to the product management team to give you a deep dive into some high-level features within the Spectra Assure solution. First off, I'm going to pass it to Deval.
Thank you, Richard. Hey, everyone, welcome to today's webinar. So as Richard mentioned, we have 6 main categories within our Spectra Assure product. And so let's get started with the first one. The first one is going to be malware. And malware, as we all know, stands for malicious software. And that refers to any software that's designed to harm, exploit, or gain unauthorized access to a computer system, and includes a wide range of harmful software. So all the way from viruses, worms, Trojans, ransomware, and to spyware. And a simpler way to think about malware would be, think of malware as a burglar in your house that can cause various kinds of harm. So if you imagine your computer system as this house, your malware would be akin to a burglar who finds a way to sneak in. And once inside, they can steal things like the data on your system. It can vandalize, as in damage your system, or spy on the homeowners, as in install a spyware to spy on you. All right. Now that we all know what malware looks like, let's look at how Spectra Assure helps you detect malware in both the software producer and the enterprise buyer use cases. When we think about the product capabilities, Spectra Assure has 20 inbuilt malware detection policies that range all the way from identifying complex supply chain attacks to detections made by a machine learning algorithm to detecting software packages with political protest messages. Let's zoom in on the policy that you're seeing on the screen right now. That's one of our main policies, again, where we've detected presence of malicious files by a machine learning algorithm. It's one of our key policies and heavily influenced by the behavior that the software packages exhibit. In context of Spectra Assure analysis, software behaviors refer to the behavioral indicators, and these indicators translate the underlying code actions into the potential effects those actions could have on the machine that they are running. And for example, so some of the behaviors that Spectra Assure helps detect would be if your software package is deleting or manipulating certain files or directories, if your software package is tampering with the keyboard and the mouse statuses, if your software package is accessing microphones and webcam when it should or shouldn't. And again, if your software packages is writing to files in the system directories, and each of these in different combinations can lead to malicious intent. So analyzing behavior to detect malware is a very powerful tool that's built into Spectra Assure. And for example, a simpler example that all of you can relate to, it would be completely reasonable for a communication software like Zoom or MS Teams to require webcam access. But if you were to scan your, let's say, simpler application like a Notepad application within Spectra Assure, and if Spectra Assure is telling you that the Notepad application requires webcam access, that should be a cause of concern and require further investigation. When it comes to malware detection, I can confidently say that we are the market leader in identifying malware within your environment. And as Richard mentioned, I would like to reiterate, we analyze more than 20 million files daily and identify 3 million incidents of malware on a daily basis. Now that you know how Spectra Assure helps you find malware, let's look at the recent malware incident that involved both the software producer and the enterprise buyer use cases. A popular communication software that was used by 500,000 organizations worldwide and had more than 12 million active daily users suffered a double supply chain attack. So a developer downloaded a compromised trading financial app that contained malware and installed it on his machine. And this malware, after installation, installed a backdoor on the employee's device, allowing full access to the attackers to the compromised system. The attackers in this case were then able to gain access and then move laterally within the organization and then compromise the build system of the company, infecting the final flagship product, the output binary. And then this binary, without any checks, was then installed in the computers of their customers, leading to the malware being planted inside the customers' corporate networks. This was one of the unique cases that we saw that, again, hackers were getting a lot more sophisticated, an issue that started on the software enterprise buyer use case and then migrated onto the software producer use cases. So if you are a company that builds software or purchases software, you should be looking into Spectra Assure. That was everything that I had for malware. Let's move to the next slide and we can look at the second category, which is vulnerability. A vulnerability is a weakness in a system or a software that can be exploited by threats like hackers or malware to gain some sort of unauthorized access or cause harm. And a simpler way to look at vulnerabilities would be to think of them as weak locks on the door that can be exploited by a burglar. The weak lock doesn't cause harm by itself, but if discovered by the burglar, it enables easy access to cause problems. And that's one of the things that you'll see over and over again is in complex supply chain attacks, you'll see a combination of vulnerabilities, malware, tampering, secrets, mitigations, whole host of kind of different categories coming into play to enable that complex software supply chain attack. When we think about how Spectra Assure helps you find vulnerabilities, we have 7 inbuilt comprehensive vulnerability detection policies that cover a range of issues. And one of the differentiating factors that we have is we help you prioritize amongst these vulnerabilities. So we enrich the vulnerability data with additional tags that help you with issue prioritization. And some of these tags would be, if a vulnerability is patch mandated, for example, where a regulatory body like CISA or a government agency has issued a patching mandate for the vulnerabilities, or the vulnerabilities is being actively exploited, and some of the confirmed cases of vulnerabilities that we've seen within an extensive customer database, or we are seeing malware working along with the vulnerabilities and exploiting these vulnerabilities to cause harm within customer networks. So these are some of the ways in which powerful ways we can help you prioritize and help you focus on the top issue vulnerabilities to focus on. Let's look at the recent kind of in a high profile vulnerability related incident that we had. Most of you on the call would have heard about Log4j incident. And so this specific vulnerability affected Log4 shell, which was a vulnerability within the Log4j logging library. And what that did was Log4 shell allowed you remote code execution on affected systems. And given the widespread use of Log4j, this vulnerability had a broad attack surface affecting countless applications and services. And so this example is very relevant because many of the customers had zero idea if the applications that are installed within the enterprise were affected by Log4j or not affected. So again, the more logical step would be to reach out to your vendor and check with them if it's affected or no. But on your side, what you can also do is scan the application with Spectra Assure. We would generate that SBOM for you, and you can quickly look in that software bill of materials whether that specific affected component exists or no. And if it does, you should be reaching out to your vendor, and also at the same time in the interim isolate that application within your organization. One of the last things I would like to highlight is, you might ask, there are many other tools that also help you find vulnerability. How is Spectra Assure different than the SAST, DAST, and the SA in the market? One of our key differentiators that kind of Richard mentioned is we don't need access to the source code. And so again, if you are on the software producer side or on the enterprise buyer side, and if you are using third-party components, you don't have access to the source code, we definitely help you look inside our application package and tell you whether we can find anything malicious or everything looks good. It also helps you find that SBOM generation. So if your industry, if you're, if it's mandated for you to generate that SBOM, you want that have visibility, we can help you generate that SBOM without access to the source code. And unlike traditional SCA tools, Spectra Assure doesn't need access to the source code. And we are proactive and not just reactive. And we are designed to counter today's sophisticated software supply chain attacks and reduce the noise of false positives. That's everything from my side. Dave, over to you for the next few ones.
All right. Thank you, Deval. So I'm going to cover the tampering aspects in Spectra Assure. And so software tampering. So first of all, what does that even mean? So tampering is really the process of surreptitiously altering software and its underlying behavior. And the theme of analogies that Deval started with, you can think of tampering as akin to someone secretly changing the contents of a letter that in a sealed envelope without the owner's knowledge. And there's countless ways that tampering can be done when it comes to software, and some haven't even been discovered yet. And that's really the problem, is there's always a risk out there that of a novel software supply chain attack, something no one has seen before, and that's where our tampering detection comes into play. I mean, I guess the biggest example that everyone would be familiar with there would be SolarWinds, which was very targeted, very novel. And yet there were some red flags that could be detected with the analysis of behaviors that you could see that software had been tampered with. So now you'd like to think that if you lock down all of your development systems very tightly, as a software producer, lock down your systems, with stringent security controls. I'm talking about your source code repositories, your CI/CD build environments, etc. That then you'll be able to prevent tampering. But it's just very challenging, if not impossible, to prevent or even know about every attack vector. And that's mainly due to the complex nature of how modern software is being built today. There's just a lot of moving parts. So the bottom line is that you want to know if your software was tampered with before releasing it. The best way to test for that is by analyzing the final software artifact that results from the build process, and specifically looking at the underlying behaviors that the software is capable of. Do the behaviors deviate from the intended functional purpose of that application? That would be a red flag to indicate tampering. But even more powerful than looking at the behaviors alone is to compare the difference in behaviors from one version to the next. So, for example, if a software that you have is this, maybe it just is used for displaying PDF documents, and then a new version is released and that introduces a behavior which monitors keystrokes of users. Well, that's deviated from its acceptable behaviors, and that kind of change from one version to the next likely indicates the software has been tampered with in a malicious way. So also here kind of on the top box, I want to talk about reproducible builds. This is a concept where developers have a duplicated build environment that is separate and isolated from the original one. The idea is that these two build systems will produce identical software artifacts. And that meaning that the cryptographic hashes of the artifacts will be the same at the end. This is a really effective technique to detect tampering, because let's say a threat actor infiltrates one of the build environments, and that allows them to surreptitiously insert some malicious code into the software. Well, in that case, the two artifacts produced by these separate build systems will not be identical, and therefore it would allow you to detect that tampering. One of the challenges with using reproducible builds in this way, it has been that the two file hashes will typically not match even for untampered software. And that's due to natural differences in things like timestamps and order of operations in the automated build process. So when the hashes don't match, how do you know it's because of innocuous things like timestamps or because a threat actor has inserted malicious code? Spectra Assure provides a solution for this because it compares the two artifacts in terms of behaviors, not hashes. So you can actually think of it as a hash of behaviors, not a file hash, which is a bit by bit comparison. And so it does this analysis using a fast static binary approach, not a dynamic sandboxing approach, and which has a lot of overhead and it can be slow. So for our customers, Spectra Assure makes reproducible builds practical and useful for detecting tampered software. So let's move on now and talk about secrets. All right, so switching gears, and secrets in the world of cybersecurity, the analogy here is you have secret plans in a James Bond movie, and these plans could be passwords, maps, keys that need to be kept safe from enemy spies. In the world of software, secrets are just values that shouldn't be exposed to the outside world because they grant access to data or online resources. One of the highest profile incidents here of secrets being leaked happened to Circle CI in December 2022. And actually, Circle CI was on the slide Richard had showed earlier about some of these incidents that have happened. So in that incident, different types of secrets actively used by their customers were stolen, including tokens that allowed access to AWS resources and GitHub source repositories. Nobody knew that these secrets were being exposed until one of Circle CI's customers started seeing suspicious activity in their protected GitHub repos. So how do secrets get exposed? Well, often it can be developers inadvertently having them stored in a source code repo. But in addition, they can also end up in a final software build artifact. So that final software package that is released. But in that case, it can often be buried many layers deep within that package, contained in a file, or even a file itself can represent a secret. So specifically, what types of secrets can Spectra Assure detect? Some examples, just to name a few, would be user credentials, private encryption keys, AWS STS tokens, Google Cloud API keys, access tokens for DevOps tools like GitHub, GitLab, JFrog Artifactory, things of that nature. That was just a small list. Fully documented list is available. Now, one important aspect and a very helpful feature of Spectra Assure here is that the secrets detection capability, it can do a liveness check of certain types of secrets that are found. So as part of the analysis, not only will it be able to detect a secret and report on that, but it will also run a test to see whether that value is active and valid. So if it's a GitHub API token and it's a public GitHub token, the product will actually query the GitHub API endpoint to see with that token to see if it gets a positive response or an authorized response. So this liveness check, really helps with that aspect, saying, is this token active? Is it valid? And therefore, can it be abused? So this really helps with, our customers can understand whether those secrets, which ones are presenting the most risk, and it helps accelerate the review and remediation process. So, really both software producers and enterprise buyer customers find secret detection valuable. The producers, though, especially because they don't want their secrets being exposed in the software they're publishing to the world. But also, even buyers, they understand the value because finding secrets in a vendor's software package, that would indicate that that vendor probably doesn't have a strong software security program. And as a buyer, that would be something that you want to take into consideration in the whole evaluation process. So with that, that's kind of all I had on tampering and secrets. Now I'll turn it over to my colleague, Charlie.
Thanks, Dave. The last two policy groups we have on here may not be the sexiest of the lists, but I truly believe that they are kind of equally as important to both stopping attacks and more broadly managing risk in the software supply chain. So the first one we'll talk about is mitigations. Mitigations are a set of security best practices that can be enabled by a publisher during the software compilation process. So in other words, they are controls that are designed to ensure the attack surface of an application is actually being reduced or hardened prior to publishing or deploying that software. And if we continue with the analogies that we have going today, you can think of mitigations as kind of these protection mechanisms that would maybe protect a castle from intruders, right? If you think about the guards, the walls, the moats, the trapdoors, whatever they may be. And it may similarly seem like there are a lot of things you can do, right, to mitigate software supply chain risks that would fit into that category. But one of the main ways of doing this is through the protection of what we call memory corruption or memory exploitation. And there's a really interesting study that came out from Microsoft back in 2019, which I believe still rings true today. And what they uncovered was that the root cause of 70% of all security vulnerabilities that Microsoft themselves were fixing or assigning a CVE for in their own products, 70% were actually directly associated with memory safety issues. And until now, the kind of broader security community had just viewed these memory safety mitigations as really only good practice and not in any way kind of a formal necessity or firm requirement for software development. But now we're seeing a much more formal push from both legislative and regulatory bodies to encourage a much broader adoption of these memory safety mitigations. So in the US, for example, we saw it first in a bill that was passed back in December 2022 called the Securing Open Source Software Act, which specifically cited memory safety as a key feature or a key risk factor contributing to this kind of barrage of attacks that was happening on the open source software ecosystem. And then just 2 weeks ago, a new report was published by the Office of the National Cyber Director in the US, which had a huge focus once again on memory protection and memory exploitation. And if we link this back to our product within Spectra Assure, we now have more than 75 unique policies that we run against every single package that is uploaded. And we do that in effort to kind of help our customers ensure that the software that they produce or that they consume has capabilities enabled within it to help protect against these attacks on memory that we're seeing kind of running rampant. So for example, we look for things like, are anti-exploitation features enabled for Windows files within a software package, using capabilities like data execution prevention or control flow guard. And in the events that our product does locate these missing mitigations, very similar to kind of the mock-up we have on the screen, the workflow, you can see that we'll flag them to the user to make them aware what is the risk of the issue that we found. And then as always, you'll see in a bit when we do the demo, but we always provide kind of a next step to fix the issue, all with the ultimate hope of giving our customers the information they need to make a business decision, right? Do they want to ship or release that software or deploy it in their environment, knowing the missing mitigations that may exist? And then moving to the last one, last but not least, is the final thing that we look for when we analyze a software package is the presence of components which maintain certain license types that may pose a risk to the organization using it. So understanding your licenses that are tied to your software is, and I can't stress this enough, absolutely critical, because there are a variety of different open source license types, whether they be permissive licenses, copyleft licenses, and various others, all of which come with these kind of varied obligations and restrictions that you're beholden to. And non-compliance with those obligations can lead to serious legal complications. So for example, in the past, we've seen lawsuits that have been filed in amounts upwards of $100 million regarding the breach of open source license compliance. So it can absolutely have a direct kind of material and financial impact on your business if they're not handled correctly. The good news in saying that is that by understanding and cataloging those licenses, you can better manage and monitor the risk that they present. And that's something Spectra Assure can once again help you with. Because like many of us have mentioned so far, we are able to generate an SBOM for every package that we deconstruct and analyze. So we're able to flag the license types that are applied to all the components and dependencies which make up those packages. And then we'll go ahead and escalate those to you if they are a type of license, such as a copyleft license, which you can see in the screen, which may present risk to your organization. And it's important to note these policies are handled quite differently from some of the other ones that we've talked through, because we don't traditionally consider these significant enough to actually fail a package or stop a build outright. Although, of course, you can configure these policies however you would like. But we'd recommend kind of consulting with your legal or compliance team to make sure that they're cataloged and managed in accordance with your risk, with your organization's risk appetite as you start to identify them. And that's really important to do before either publishing a package if you're a developer, or even on the consumer side, we often see license compliance as a key element of a lot of M&A use cases. So for example, making sure software you may acquire through an M&A transaction isn't putting you at additional risk of non-compliance. So that covers my last two sections. I'll pass back to Richard to cover the importance of the final build exam.
Excellent. Well, I appreciate everyone on that one. I hope you are all feeling a little bit more informed into the larger scope of threats that exist within commercial software. It goes beyond the open source. And so this is where we're sitting here in terms of our placement. You might be thinking, well, is this a SDLC tool? Is this a third-party risk management tool? It's both. We're sitting between the producers and buyers, capable of doing that final build exam. There's an element here that we haven't talked about and emphasized enough, though, is the fact that we can do all of this analysis without the need of a source code. So you can, as if you're on the purchaser side, the enterprise buyer side, you're getting the executable as part of your trial process. You can take that executable, upload it into RL Spectra Assure, and get that full report, get that SBOM, get that security report, understand the risk that that software is going to be introducing into your environment. And on the purchaser side, as your organization is going through, or on the, producer side, as your organization is going through that development lifecycle, you're hitting the tools, the code tools, looking at the open source codes, and it's part of that CI/CD platform. But as the final package comes together, doing the final build exam is a critical need to understand how everything is assembled. Our Chief Trust Officer, Sasha, here at ReversingLabs, actually described this in a really unique and compelling way. There's a reason why auto manufacturers crash test the whole car. You can test the windshield, you can test the wheels, you can test the tires all individually, and they all might look great and safe and secure. But when they are combined together, when it is put into motion, it could change the dynamic of each component. And unless you have the ability to really, truly analyze everything together, you are unaware of the risk, threats, and vulnerabilities that exist within that space. Great question came in. We'll answer that at the end. So in that final build analysis, RL Spectra Assure is the only one capable of providing that complete automated software analysis. We are the only ones delivering that to close the gap in the vendor risk management as well as third-party software acquisition. Now, we've talked a lot about it, but I want to show it to you. And by I want to show it to you, I'm going to ask Charlie to show it to you. Charlie, I'm going to stop share, and it is all yours.
Sorry, let me know if you can see my screen.
Yes, we're good.
Okay, cool. So a couple minutes ago, Richard kind of displayed the two types of personas that may traditionally leverage our Spectra Assure product. So he talked about publishers of software and then also enterprise buyers or consumers of software. For today's purposes of illustrating a very specific use case, I will provide a product demo through the lens of the enterprise buyer. So once again, this is someone who's trying to understand and manage the risk presented by third-party software throughout the kind of life cycle of use. So you can see on my screen, we've logged into the Spectra Assure SaaS portal. This is the initial view that you're seeing is our color file stream. You can really think of this as your scratch pad. It's simply a list of kind of software packages that I previously uploaded for analysis on an ad hoc basis. Within our projects tab, there's a much more structured way of organizing packages should you decide to group them into specific kind of products, cohorts, or projects of some kind. Now, Richard did mention it before. We don't need access to the source code. So as long as you have, minimize my screen here, as long as you have access to the binary, you can upload it to analysis to the portal. So it's as simple as clicking kind of the upload file button in the top right-hand corner of the file stream and selecting a file for upload, or navigating in the projects tab, selecting upload version, and placing that version or package directly within the project structure you like. For now, I'm going to take a look at a few of the packages and files that I've already uploaded and analyzed, just so we can start to think about how can ReversingLabs actually help our customers through these 4 stages of the software consumption lifecycle that were previously presented. So we'll start with acquisition. So to create a kind of hypothetical scenario, let's say your business is in need of some type of software to support the ability to read and annotate PDF files because you receive a large volume of them throughout the course of business. Well, there might be a number of solutions that you're considering acquiring, and you need to make sure they're secure before you purchase them. Meaning what? Meaning that you're not putting kind of the sensitive documentation that you entrust them with at risk of breach. So I've gone ahead and uploaded 2 kind of very well-known solutions that can be used to read and annotate PDF documents to our portal for analysis. On the top, we have Sumatra PDF, and on the bottom, we have LibreOffice. So we'll start with Sumatra PDF. The first view that you'll get of a file that's uploaded is kind of this summary scorecard report. It's a very high-level summary of the results. So on the top, we have kind of general package information, such as publisher, platform type, license information. And then down here, we have kind of the 6 types of policy checks that Dave, Dhaval, and I just walked through, kind of grouped into 3 high-level risk categories. So compliance, exposure, and threats. To get more details on the actual analysis results, all you have to do is select details for software package analysis, and it will bring us to the summary report. Now, very quickly, you can see that this package has failed, meaning that we are advising that you are not deploying it within your environment or not using it. And the main reason for failure, you can see right here, is that we were able to identify a malicious component embedded within that software package. And this is kind of the perfect example of the tagline for this webinar. How do you know when your software is malware? Well, here you can very clearly see that it is malicious. And if you were to deploy this within your environment, it would pose an immediate threat to your business. Another feature to highlight here is the ability to share a report. And this is really helpful in the context of, once again, the enterprise buyer who is trying to manage third-party risk and supply chain security, because it provides a mechanism to share the results of this analysis directly with your vendor. And that's going to help make sure you can work collaboratively with your security counterparts of the publisher, and making sure that you're not only kind of ensuring transparency in the testing and oversight of that your organization is doing of their products, but also making sure that the issues you're finding are getting escalated to them and resolved much faster. So all you need to do to use this functionality is select Share Report. You're able to select a expiration date for the link, just so they don't have indefinite access to the results. And then you simply select Generate Link, and it will give you a link to copy and share directly with them. You'll also see the concept of kind of ReversingLabs levels being introduced here in the highlighted section. So we at ReversingLabs have defined 5 distinct levels of increasingly stringent software security requirements. And we design these to provide kind of a gradual guided approach of improving software quality in a measurable way. Now, once again, in the context of third-party risk or vendor risk management, we often see organizations or enterprise customers aligning these levels with their inherent risk segmentation criteria. So for those commercial software packages that are most critical to their business, they would expect a very high level of security maturity to be achieved. And therefore, they're going to configure this package to fail if all the requirements met in level 5, which is additive, by the way, so levels 1 through 5, are not met. On the other hand, if the business very quickly needs to onboard the software because it maybe doesn't pose much of a risk. So let's say, for example, it doesn't process or store sensitive data, or it doesn't allow the vendor to connect into their environment, then they may decide to enforce the lowest level of security, which will essentially pass the software package as long as it's free from some of those most fundamental security concerns. So it doesn't have malware in it. There's no tampered signatures, unprotected keys, or source code leaks that you can see there. Now, regardless of the outcome, the report will always kind of provide this nice visual roadmap for guiding the vendor or the publisher on the journey to improve their software quality. And what are those critical path fixes that are required to move from level to level here? In this case, you can see that they set the scan level to 5, meaning that they had the highest expectations that it would achieve. But unfortunately, because malware was detected, you can see it didn't even achieve level 1. Now, before we go and dig into the kind of structure of the report, I did want to go back and compare it to our other option we're considering for acquisition, which is LibreOffice. So if I navigate back to this project structure and I open the first report that's analyzed here, 7.4.5, you can now see this is also failing, but the main issue causing failure is not because that malware was identified, because you can see there's no evidence of malware inclusion, but instead because of these 13 actively exploited vulnerabilities that were being identified. Again, if we open the report, you'll see this fail indication in the top left-hand corner. And although the report is still failing, you can very quickly see from our levels that this package actually achieved level 3. So we can confirm, although it may not meet the business's desired outcomes of level 5, it is still the more secure option between this and Sumatra PDF, which was the alternative solution the business was considering, right? So that's just one example of a way that you can use metadata within Spectra Assure to help aid in procurement decision-making. Now, let's say for the purposes of the demo, you decide to move forward with LibreOffice as your software. You can then use the approval action that we have within the portal to provide a kind of traceable audit record that the business has reviewed and accepted the results that were flagged in the analysis. So to do that, all you have to do is select the actions ellipses, go down and select approve, and then we provide some either pre-canned statements, or for the purposes of the demo, I'll just say test. Now, once I approve it, you can just hover over it. And once again, for audit records, as I mentioned before, it will tell you who approved it, when, and the rationale for doing that. Now, once it's approved for use, this kind of takes us to the next phase of the software development lifecycle, which is deployment. So in other words, how can we use the analysis that was performed to inform a secure installation or integration of this application into our corporate environment? Well, there's quite a bit of information you can use within a report to do that. So for example, if I open up this report again, I'll navigate once again to the issues tab. So you'll see kind of the policy categories that we talked about, what are the issues that are identified. For every issue that was found, I'll pick one for known vulnerabilities. I mentioned this before, but we always provide a problem statement that will describe kind of the risk that is presented to the business by this issue, as well as next steps. And those are essentially proposed mitigation actions to mitigate this risk that's been identified. So in this case, it's recommending you perform some type of impact analysis for those critical CVEs that were identified. You update the component to the latest version, or if the update can't resolve the issue, you should create a plan to isolate or replace the affected component. And then if you plan to share this report, once again, like we talked about before, through our share report capability, if you're sharing it with a vendor, there's other metadata that's complementary to this issue that you can navigate for and share as well. So because this is a vulnerability, I'll navigate to our vulnerabilities tab. And here you can quickly see what are all those critical CVEs that are impacting this package. If I open one of these up by random, once again, you'll see more information about that CVE. So what are the components that are impacted by this vulnerability? What was the version it was introduced in, resolved in, and a description about it. And that's really important because it not only tells you what needs to be fixed, but also, for example, with the resolved in, how they should actually go about fixing it. And for some reason, if it can't be fixed, once again, making sure that you have all the information you need to either work with the vendor or work with your business, maybe your architecture team internally, to make sure you have downstream mitigating controls in place to help protect the application from these known issues before you actually deploy it. Now that's going to take us to our third out of 4 stages, which is maintenance. So we've now ensured kind of secure deployments of the LibreOffice 7.4.5. Now we want to track the security of the software over time. And that's where our capabilities to perform differential analysis really come in handy. So one of the benefits of working directly within this projects tab is that differential analysis is automatically performed for every subsequent software version that's added. So you can see that I've already gone ahead and uploaded the next version, 7.5.0. And as I open this, you'll see this kind of comparison neatly summarized in this scorecard now. Now, at first glance, you'll see that the software quality is kind of nearly the same. But as we dig into it, you'll see the only minor difference here is that we actually have now 12 actively exploited vulnerabilities instead of 13, so it's gone down. So some minor process has actually been made by the vendor, no matter how small. And because we know this is an actively exploited vulnerability and therefore maybe poses an increased risk to your business, you may actually decide that you only want your organization to use this updated version now and not the old version because you know it's actually riskier. So in this case, you can actually go about revoking your old approval. I'll pick a random reason here, and then approving the new version. Test. You'll also see a new check has actually been performed here, which is passed. So that's actually just showing the differential analysis. And essentially this is saying the differential analysis didn't identify any new or critical failing issues that may have been introduced by some of the changes between the versions. So once again, we can go through and open up the full report. And all of a sudden, you'll start seeing this new differential analysis, this diff tab, which is being introduced. So here you can see issues that have been resolved since the last version, issues that have been introduced since the new version, so where it's gotten worse, and then modified files by version. And if I click on one of these modified files that have been added, you'll start to see, as Dave kind of mentioned before in the whole tampering concept, where have new behaviors actually been introduced by changes that have been made to this package between versions. And behavioral analysis is really important, back to Dave's point, in detecting those more sophisticated tampering attacks, like a SolarWinds style attack, where malicious actors aren't using kind of known vulnerabilities. They're not using malware with known signatures, but instead they're compromising the build or development pipelines of those upstream software publishers, and they're inserting legitimate signed code, which is going to introduce some type of legitimate behavior that allows them to do something malicious. So here we don't see anything out of the ordinary, but if something does pop up in the future, like it starts recording your keystrokes, it starts reaching out to remote IP addresses and uploading files over the internet, things that are indicative of attack like data exfiltration, well, that could be an indication that the application has been tampered with, especially in the context of this application, which is once again used for reading and annotating PDF files. There's no reason it should be reading your keystrokes or reaching out to remote servers and exfiltrating files. And then finally, that will bring us to our last kind of use case and stage of the software development lifecycle, or consumption lifecycle rather, which is monitoring. So a question we often get when discussing supply chain security is, how do we enable ourselves as a business to more quickly triage and respond to systematic issues like Log4j in the future? Well, one feature we haven't talked about yet is our SBOMs, our software bill of materials. So like we said before, for every package we analyze, we're able to generate an SBOM. And the really cool thing about the way we display our SBOMs in the product is that they're all queryable. So if you do get a question in the future, like, does Log4j exist in this specific vendor package, rather than having to reach out to them over email, wait for them to triage it and get back to you, you can query this yourself. So I can say, does Log4j exist? Yes, I can see it does exist. through multiple iterations of the component. And I can also see the kind of vulnerabilities that are impacted by this as well. Now, that wraps up my demo of how we can specifically help kind of software buyers identify and mitigate risk within the software supply chain. I do want to reiterate that what I showed today is really just the tip of the iceberg of what our solution can do. There are many more use cases. So if you do have questions about how the solution works or how we can help solve some of your use cases, please don't kind of hesitate to reach out and get in touch.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Charlie. Get back into my slides. We're going to have one last slide. So what we've covered here is a high level component of how RL Spectra Assure is identifying material risk, stopping software supply chain attacks, and addressing the evolving SSCS needs. Spectra Assure is a very, very powerful tool that has a myriad of opportunities to impact your development lifecycle as well as your procurement lifecycle. We do have a great question in here. We're going to pass it over. So if anyone's got any questions, put them in the Q&A now. Let's get in there. I appreciate everyone being patient in this. Is this a tool you could apply to software, a medical device, either embedded or as a mobile PC cloud app? Or would this only look at things in the software supply chain, like the development and configuration management tools? Who wants to take that one on?
I can take this one. Megan, thanks a lot for the questions. Yes, you can actually use Spectra Assure to essentially scan your applications, your cloud applications, your PC applications as well. There are certain nuances in terms of what language your app was built in, what frameworks are being used. But we are happy to kind of work with you and help you figure out what exactly is supported and not supported. And as as a value proposition, we do have very large medical device manufacturers as one of our customers that make it a point to scan all their software with Spectra Assure. And again, generating that SBOM that is now being mandated by FDA as well. So yeah, please do reach out to us. We definitely support parts of it. Happy to work with you on that, sir.
Right, the medical use case is a very interesting one. If I'm thinking the customer you're thinking about, their use case in the third-party risk management side is very, very comprehensive and is even leading to them to finding vulnerabilities that are, multi-vendor deep within the software that they are looking to acquire as part of their process. So it's something that we are very interested in helping out with, and please do get in touch, Megan. Another question that just came up, do you need the vendor's approval to test software?
I can take this one.
Okay.
We've never had a customer struggle with this, is the short answer. But at the end of the day, it ultimately depends on your contractual agreements with the vendor. You should always have the ability to perform audits of the vendor and oversee the products and services that you consume from them. And it's actually really interesting because I am a part of a number of kind of CISA working groups, the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency of the United States. And they just released in kind of an acquisition primer, so specifically for this buyer use case that we're talking about right now, that talks about how should you work with vendors to get SBOMs or evidence that their software is secure before you actually acquire it and purchase it. And one of their main suggestions is if they're not willing to provide that information yourself, step 2 or step 3 is making sure that you have the right within your contract to do what they're calling self-assessment. So generate the SBOM yourself, evaluate the security of SBOMs yourself. So you should absolutely be making sure that is included in your contractual rights with any software vendor you're working with. The other question that comes up often is, aren't you reverse engineering the software? Despite the name ReversingLabs, we don't actually reverse engineer the software in the traditional sense because we're not creating pseudocode, for example, as an output of our binary analysis. We're simply deconstructing it, extracting metadata, analyzing that metadata to understand is there risk or threat presented by that software. So hopefully that answers the question. If there are more questions about engaging with vendors, how to work with them, how to find success out of the product, we're, like Deval said, we're more than glad to work with you through your use case.
Thanks, Charlie. Dave, I think this one's for you. Do you automate this? How would you automate this in the CI/CD pipeline?
Right. So for software development shops who want to kind of incorporate this analysis into their build pipelines, we have a lot of options available. Just in the past year, we've released a couple of Docker images. We have GitHub Actions that make it really easy if you're a GitHub shop. Just this week, we published some Azure DevOps extensions that help out if you're using Azure DevOps. I mean, the key thing really is our command line interface, our CLI tool. That CLI allows you to scan locally very quickly. We also have APIs to that portal that Charlie demoed today, where you can use the APIs to upload the scan for analysis, where the scanning takes place in the cloud. So there's a lot of different options for software producers. You can set up different triggers to do this analysis. With every build, you can have it do nightly builds just on when you're about to release something. There's a lot of different options for incorporating this in a CI/CD build environment. Yeah, so that's kind of my focus, and definitely reach out to me if you had any other further questions on how to do that.
Great. Awesome. And we are at time. If you have any other questions, comments, concerns, you're about to receive a survey. Please fill it out. We really appreciate that. You can also put some questions. You can reply back directly to the email that we're going to harass you with. Send to you after this email. Now, we do have a slew of webinars coming up. If you are interested in learning more about what we're doing, getting some features, we also have a product roadmap webinar coming up, I think, in a month, where we'll go over all the new features and capability within Spectra Assure, as well as our other products that we deliver out to the market. But with that, I really would love to say thank you to everyone. Thank you so much for dealing with the little technical glitch there. I apologize about that delay and staying with us as we go over time. If you have any questions as well on social media, we are on LinkedIn and Twitter. I refuse to call it the other name, and Instagram if you really want to follow our culture side on that side. Everyone, say goodbye to the wonderful guests, and I hope you have a great day.
Thank you very much.